Hey there, welcome to the channel. This is episode 1 where I'm going to investigate the investigation of the Benoit murders and everything around it, including the supernatural aspect most have either ignored or not considered. I will say right here, right now, Chris Benoit did not do it. And I will add, Vince McMahon is a drug-dealing dirtbag who has been running a death knell for 30 plus years with no remorse or repercussions. At least not for him. Cannot say the same for those he employs. Perfect example of that would be Owen Hart being forced to do something he felt not safe at a workplace. He was threatened to be fired, went on to do it, fell 70 feet into the ring and died. But yet, another thing Vince McMahon was able to get away with. Those who put their body to and beyond the limit of in the ring to line his pockets, they're nothing but a stepping stone to further expand his empire. You could consider the McMahon family to be a criminal empire. Vince himself being the Don. Drugs, threats, murders, fraud, embezzlement, satanic cults, you name it, it goes on behind the scenes. After his first arrest, or arrest, I should say, for trafficking and conspiracy to distribute narcotics, it became the wrestlers who had to take the risks while he took the rewards, which would explain why Hardy was found with all those drugs in his home. Do you really think they were his? Somebody has to supply the wrestlers, and Vince McMahon wasn't going to get his hands dirty again. He got lucky enough to get off the first one, wouldn't you think? His father is well known for threatening wrestlers, and then went on to brag about it. So it's safe to say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. There's an FBI case that was launched, and we'll get into that at some point in the series, and needless to say, it was buried. What a surprise. Which would explain why in this particular case, when we get to it, in the police files itself, it says we will share our information with anyone but the FBI. Why wouldn't you want to share it with somebody who would have more resources and be able to help solve it? Seems kind of suspicious to me. So, to get started, first I'd like to thank Edward Starries from Muckrock News for using the Freedom of Information Act to acquire these files used for this video, along with Conspiracy Series and Purple Sky 11. Some of the information gathered by them did help me with my investigation as well, and I believe in giving credit where credit is due. Start by looking at the incident report. It took them 1 day to decide what happened, less than 1 day when you really think about it. And a supplemental report is supposed to have as much detail as possible, more detail than the original report. This does not show much of anything. They had to come back a second day to collect evidence, but yet there's little to no proof of that in any of this. See, supplemental date and time. So apparently there was no improvement to the reports. So we're going to look here. This is the log sheet of everyone that entered. Before we get into my suspicions with this, we're going to look into the police themselves. This is the list of the people that were on the scene for the Benoit case. I haven't gotten too far into investigating a lot of them so far, but I will be able to say that Lieutenant Pope was given a promotion, which more than likely came with a raise, shortly after. I will say Trey Powell should not have been in charge of any sort of handling of evidence. He fumbled the ball on that one. And Kraft is someone we will look into. at some point. But for now, we're going to get into Fayetteville Police Department. They're closed Saturday, closed Sunday, so 2 days a week. There's no crime in that city, I suppose. 8 to 5, they're open. Which means by the time they took that call, their day was pretty much over, coming off a weekend. If they weren't hungover, they had no intention of doing much else that day. In fact, from the 911 calls, it kind of sounds like they were trying to put it off as much as possible anyway. So then we have the Fayetteville Sheriff's Department. Again, closed 2 days out of the week. And the lack of detail, or attention to detail, that they give, if this is not their accurate hours, shows why the case was never solved in the first place. They claim it was solved, but if it was solved, that would involve having enough evidence to follow through with a conviction, prosecution, which was never done. It was the media telling us, okay, this is what happened, this is how he did it, let's move on. So then, these are reviews of the Sheriff's Department. That one seems okay. Feel free to take your time reading these. I went through it fairly quickly. But my favorite one: lazy, disrespectful, absolutely no interest in protecting or serving. If you travel through Fayetteville County, feel free to run into people, cyclists, etc. with your car. They don't care, even if you nearly kill someone with your car. Well, that would explain why they did a shitty job with the investigation, I suppose. We'll continue with these reviews anyway. Some good, some bad. A lot of bad ones. Apparently, they do not take care of their prisoners. They've substituted milk for instant mashed potatoes. And just not a very good place to be as far as lockups would be considered. And apparently all their vehicles are missing things. Like turning signals, for instance. Which would be a safety concern, but because they're the police, they can get away with it. That's the world we've now begun to live in. So for this next part, I'm going to play all the 911 calls from Fagan, Dennis Fagan, the head of security for WWE, and then we will walk through them afterwards. So here we go.
Hi, I just spoke to one of the other officers there. My name is Dennis Fagan. I'm a retired detective in New York City. I run the security for World Wrestling, and one of our wrestlers that lives down there is missing. And he told me to say we need a welfare check done.
Okay, what's the address?
130 Green Meadow Lane. The zip code is 30215.
All right, Dennis, what's your last name?
Fagan, Fagan.
And what's his name?
Chris Benoit. It's spelled Benoit.
Okay, and he's a wrestler?
Yes, what happened, he's a very religious gentleman, and yesterday he was supposed to show up at a pay-per-view and never got on the plane, never showed up. They've tried to reach his wife, Nancy. She doesn't answer. They've tried to call his house. It's out of character for him. So at 3 o'clock this morning, there was a message left for one of the other wrestlers, and basically it says, the dogs are in the backyard, the back door is open, goodbye, and that was it.
Dogs in the yard?
Yes, and the back door is open. He didn't say anything else, and that was it. That message was left at 3 o'clock this morning for another wrestler.
Okay, and that's 130 Green Meadow Lane.
Yes.
Okay, and what's the phone number for you?
My cell is 646-739-1992.
Okay, what does he look like?
Chris is about 6'1", very muscular, very stocky, has a very wide neck, looks like a wrestler.
Okay. White male, black male?
Yes, male white.
White male. Okay.
This guy's got short black hair.
Okay. All right. We'll go ahead and send somebody out there to check on it. If you want to call us back in like 45 minutes or so. If they number is back? Yeah, it's 770-461-4357. Yeah, and if he's there, we'll tell him to give you a call. But if you want to call back and check to see if if anybody was there or anything, just call us back in about 30, 45 minutes. Anybody can talk to you. It doesn't matter.
Great.
They're going to ask you for the address again, but that's about it. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Hi, you reached Dennis Fagan. Leave your name and number, and I will get right back to you. Thank you.
When you have finished recording, you may hang up or press pound for more options.
Mr. Fagan, this is the Fayette County Sheriff's Dispatch. I do have a couple of deputies out at Mr. Benoit's residence, but the gate is locked, and there are two pretty aggressive canines, or aggressive German Shepherds out there that are, our deputies are unable to get in. If you happen to have a gate code or anything for him, if you could give me a call back at 770-461-4357. 770-461-4357. Thank you very much. Mr. Fagan.
Yes.
This is with Sheriff's Department Dispatch.
Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good. Did you get my message, or did you just?
No. I just called the number back.
Okay, very good. I do have a couple of deputies out at Mr. Benoit's house.
Okay.
But the gate is locked, and they're unable to get inside.
The gate is locked.
Yeah, you wouldn't happen to have a code for that, would you?
No, I don't. And the message that we got, like I said, left a message at 3 o'clock in the morning for another wrestler.
Right.
The gate's open, the dogs are in the backyard by the pool, and the back door's open. That was it.
Right. Yeah, because apparently
that's why they're worried about him, because Chris is very born again Christian, very religious.
Right.
It's unlike him. He didn't show up for a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
He never made it to the plane. They can't reach his wife. Nobody's answering the home phone. Nobody's answering the cell phone.
Yeah, and I think as far as, I'm not sure how far away from the road the house is, so I'm not sure if they're able to tell if anybody's there.
Oh,
but
okay.
like I said, the gate. It's got a call box. Apparently nobody's answering that. Okay. And then the dogs are actually out in the front, and they're
all right, okay.
Yeah, and they're pretty. According to my deputy, they're pretty aggressive as well. So.
Okay.
But they're not friendly-ish, okay. So yeah, you don't happen to know anybody that would know that gate code offhand, would it?
You know what? I'm going to try and make some phone calls. Maybe maybe he did leave it for somebody, and I will get back to you. Okay,
and probably what I'll do is just have I'll have my guys go ahead and leave from where they are. And as soon as you find that information out, then just give us a call back. We'll send somebody back down there.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye. Mr. Fagan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were you able to get a gate code or anything like that?
No. But what happened was they just called back. They said that there's only one neighbor to the left right there who's very friendly with them.
Okay.
They don't know if they might have the gate code, but now they're saying that there was two text messages, and they were both at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. One from his phone and one from his wife Nancy's phone.
Okay.
And they went to the same wrestler who doesn't even live anywhere near them.
Right.
And basically said, "This is the house number. The dogs are in the backyard. The patio door's unlocked," and that was it. So that's what they're worried about. And it's unlike I said, it's out of character for Chris to do anything like this.
Right.
He's missed 2 shows, one on Saturday and pay-per-view on Sunday. And so they're saying the only thing they know is that one of the wrestlers called back and said he's always talking about his neighbor next door to the left, who is, I guess, good friends with him.
Right.
But I told them about the dogs, and they were saying, they don't know. The gentleman I'm dealing with at World Wrestling is a retired judge from here in New York.
Okay.
Nobody really, has a gate code, they're saying, but The thing is, I don't know what you guys would do is if you thought something was wrong in the house,
Right.
you'd have to like taser the dogs to put them to sleep.
Basically, we just need somebody to contain him. I think that would be the main thing.
Right.
Now, that neighbor that's friendly with him, do you think they would be able possibly to contain those dogs?
That's what the other this Chavro is the name of the other wrestler. That's what he's saying. He's saying that Chris is always saying how friendly he is with his next door neighbor, but it's to the house to the left.
House to the left.
Yes, and
we don't know
like
the
I said,
name,
they all seem to be very worried because they get these messages at 3:30 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
and they said when they spoke to him the other day, he seemed depressed and he said something about food poisoning. But then like I said, they get the same messages. Nobody's answering the cell phones. Nobody's answering the house phone.
Well, that's definitely suspicious. Okay. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll have deputies swing down and see if they can make contact with the neighbors.
Okay.
And see where we can go from there.
Okay. Thank you. You'll let me know. Thank you.
Yes. No problem. Bye.
So the first call from Dennis Fagan. First of all, what the hell does religion have to do with any of it? Why did he feel the need to bring it up? Not once, but twice. He says Chris was 6'1", but Chris was considered short, according to Graham, Merry Band of Midgets. 5'11", showing he was not all that familiar with his wrestlers the wrestlers that he was supposed to be, head of security for or protecting. The company Fagan worked for was contracted. Andrews International, which means he really wasn't the head of anything. He was just placed there to deal with this. Which means, more than likely, he was what Hollywood would call a fixer, which is something we'll get into later. The second call mentions it again. Born-again Christian. Chris was battling his faith, according to the pastor of the church he and Nancy went to. But I don't understand what that would have had to have done with anything. Since Fagan felt the need to bring it up, not once but twice, we are going to explore that in part of all this investigating as well. That's where the supernatural comes in, because whether you want to admit it or not, supernatural and religions, they do go together. But that would be a different debate to have. The retired judge from New York, first we'll get back into... The story was changed several times. More text messages were uncovered. Chavo was there a week prior to the time all this went down. He admits to it in an interview where he thanks Chris for letting him trusting him to take his children to the movies, which means he took them alone. So obviously he would have had to give the address to the cab company or punch it in the GPS, meaning he was well aware of the physical address of the Benoit residence. The retired judge from New York also works for WWE, Rich Herring. So that's, in this case, we have the retired judge from New York, a retired police officer from New York, and then later on, we come into an at-home pharmacy based out of New York. I find that suspicious. Especially the at-home pharmacy part, considering all the drugs they would find. All the empty bottles. It'd be easy to fake labels. Fagan claims that Chavo had mentioned, or Chavro to him, which again goes to show, doesn't know the wrestlers. But he claims that he was told Holly and Chris were friendly with each other. But when Chris had called to find out if Daniel had horseback lessons that day, Holly found it strange because he was so antisocial. She felt the need to not only mention it to her husband, but mention both in the report to police. Chavo, he spent the weekend there a week prior to all this happening, which means he was well aware of the physical address because he had been there. Sure, you could say, oh, well, Chris probably picked him up. Yep, you're probably right. Chris would pick him up. There's no doubt about that. But Chavo admits to taking the children to the movies alone that weekend. Which means the address either had to be given to an Uber driver, which they wouldn't have had back then. So that leaves us with the cab drivers, obviously. Or punched in a GPS, meaning Chavo more than likely drove. Didn't say, you dropped us off at the movies. It said, you let me take your kids to the movies. So either way, the physical address he would have already had. So that being said, we're going to get into the phone calls from Holly, the neighbor. And they are revealing, to say the least. Now, did you hear that? 911 doesn't start recording till the operator's picked up. But we'll play it again and just listen.
Bay County 911, what is your emergency? Bay County 911, what is your emergency? Hi,
You can hear her breathing. It's been recorded before 911 even picked up. Again, raises suspicion, but we'll start the call from the beginning again and let you follow through the whole thing.
Bay County 911, what is your emergency?
Hi, the cops came to my house, and I just want to make sure that they're okay because they sent me over to my neighbor's house.
What's your address?
I'm at 110 Green Meadow Lane, and they asked me to hop the fence because they have attack dogs, and I went in, and someone had the little boy and the mom are dead, and so I ran out to scream to them, but then they went in the house, and they haven't come out yet. Are they okay? Have you?
Okay, hold on just a moment.
I know where the controls are, but I'm not going in there until, Garrett, tell the cops to come this way.
Okay, ma'am,
Did the cops call it?
listen to me. What did the cops tell you to do?
They told me because this guy's a professional wrestler and I'm friends with him, and they said, can you go put the attack dogs in the kennel? And I did that. And then I went upstairs. Everything was open, so I was yelling, Nancy, Daniel, that's the little boy.
Okay, first of all, you would have smelled it. She damn well does.
And I went up to Daniel's room and he'd been killed. And then I went up to Nancy's where she sits to watch TV, and she had been strangled and had tape on her face. And then I didn't see Mr. Benoit. I don't know where he is. I didn't want to go down in the basement for some reason.
Okay, ma'am.
He might be dead. Oh, now there's more cops here, but those cops...
Ma'am, listen to me. What did the cops tell you to do? Did they tell you to go to the neighbor's house?
Yes. And
okay.
Now they came when I said everyone's been murdered, and they went in the house, and I said I looked in every room but the basement, and they went in the basement, and now they haven't come back out.
Well, there you heard.
This is the neighbor that was told by the police to get out of the house. She's the one that found the murdered bodies. And she said when the cops ran down in the basement and she hasn't seen them, she's afraid something has happened to the cops in the basement.
Your cops...
Listen to me. The SO dispatcher said he has contact with them and they're okay.
Okay, they're okay. And
they're okay.
Another cop here. So I just wanted to make sure your cops in the basement were okay.
Did you hear how calmly she said that? I just wanted to make sure cops in the basement were okay. But just not too long ago, she was freaking crying and she was so emotional.
Hey, everything's fine. Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I just wanted to make...
Now that video file was one borrowed from Conspiracies. If you haven't checked him out, I suggest you do. He's got some pretty good ideas into what could have possibly happened as well. And there's also Purple Sky 11, who's done her own investigation into this, and she's got some interesting things to say as well. I'm not only going through what they've said or discovered, but my own discoveries as well. Since I couldn't collaborate with anyone, I have to borrow evidence or videos or recordings and go through it all myself. And some of the things are just easier to find through someone else's video. It doesn't mean I'm stealing their work or their ideas. I'm simply using the recordings because it's easier to find those 911 tapes than to search and search and search for the 911 tapes themselves. Now, if Holly was such good friends, why did she say Mr. Benoit, first of all? And then she didn't mention Nancy or Daniel's name until the second time she talked about them. It was the little boy and the mom. She was able to put the dogs in the cage, but didn't have a key to the home. Most house sitters, they would have a key, so that way they could get in, take care of the dogs, lock the place back up, whatever. Bring in the mail. She was told to put the dogs in the cage, come back out. What were the police doing in the 45 minutes she walked around the crime scene? Why was she allowed to roam around the crime scene? Seems unsafe for considering no one should have known what they would be walking into. So she could have very well have walked into somebody killing the family, putting her at risk. She walked in without an escort. Nancy's body was found covered, so how did Holly know what had happened? Did she put the blanket on her? If so, that's tampering with the crime scene. Even then, she would have had to remove the blanket partially in order to see what she describes. Why did she check every room in the house in the first place? She was told, put the dogs in the cage and come back out. She went into every room except the basement, conveniently, where Chris actually was. Another interesting thing is, I didn't get into locating this part of the podcast, but Chris Jericho does an interview with Sandra, Nancy's sister, where she mentions a hole in the fence where they could avoid being seen by news crews outside the Benoit home. And the interesting thing is, it's Holly, the neighbor, who told her about the journal, who also found the journal that we're going to go through. Told her how to avoid being seen by people or cameras to get into the Benoit residence. So next, we'll look into the journal, I suppose, before we look into Holly herself. So this document here was found beside the weight machine. You would assume it was written in Chris's writing. But we'll go on to the next one. This was on his desk. Pretty unique F there, I would say. Look at his O. Go to the next one. Shows he was organized anyway. Everything was written down so he wouldn't have an issue getting into it. He liked to stay organized. Wrote down things so he wouldn't forget, which is normal when you have that much to do, or when you've had a concussion or two. But this is Chris Benoit's journal, allegedly. This is a portion of it I was able to get. Apparently it goes on about some dark things, dark thoughts, because he missed Eddie so much, which is understandable. Notice the F, the O, It's not quite proper. Then we go on to these ones. The O. But it's this F that gets me. That's a unique F. I've never seen an F written like that, really, until I got into this case. But you can see the O has the swoop. O has the swoop. Whoever wrote this logbook wrote the whole thing. The logbook is supposed to be attached to the front of the crime scene. That way people can sign themselves in. But it was not. Now, as I may or may not have said already, actually I did not say, this journal was found later on in the garbage outside by a neighbor. Can you guess who that neighbor was? That would be Holly. Surprise, surprise. Nobody logged in the second day. Another thing, Sherpy Holly. Her name is spelt wrong, or 3 different ways throughout the police report. Again, showing lack of detail or hiding something. So now, we'll look into Holly Shretford McFay a little bit. McFeg, sorry. Nice house. Now, someone might say, well, you're putting her personal information online. That's not allowed. I found this all through public information. It's already out there. I'm putting it on here, sure. But everyone already has access to it. Here, it's her Facebook. Holly McFeg Shretford. Now, the thing I find interesting when you really go through it, it's not so much her friends. Well, not exactly anyway. But former director, New Orleans. No, it's not that I'm too worried about. This one right here, CBS Boston. Now, she worked in the same area that Kevin Sullivan grew up in. Oh, that could just be a coincidence. Absolutely, it could. But after she had her interview with the police, she took off to Boston to hire a lawyer. You don't hire a lawyer if you're innocent. What are you hiring a lawyer for? What are you hiding? That becomes the question. The funny thing is, main address, 110 Green Meadow Line. Okay, so there we go. We got Fran Sullivan. We got Dan Sullivan. Sean Sullivan. They're in her friends list, meaning she's friends with Sullivans. Then you continue to go on here for a minute. Sheo Realty, that could mean nothing. Again, New York Police Department. So there we go. We have New York attached to everything yet again. Off the leash canine training. Maybe how she was able to get the dogs to do as they were told. I don't know. Anyone that's involved with the Trump administration, I don't trust. Daniel had a mark on him, but it's considered a puncture wound. There's a video in the background noise. I haven't been able to clean it enough, and to even Conspiracy Series, he'll tell you the same thing. It cost about $1,200, $1,700, something like that, to have this video file cleaned. And he's come to the same realization. You can hear what sounds like a click click, I will blank you, and then you hear Daniel groan. My guess is, when Chris got all discombobulated during the voicemail left to Parker, the click click came from something like this. The groaning was because Daniel, he had a small bruise on his jaw. My guess is he watched his kid get smacked in the mouth by someone. You can hear something be dragged across, something heavy, dragged across the floor during that. But Chris is in the same position. You don't hear him move. There's no sign of physical movement or exertion or anything on his part during that voicemail. Just a part where he sees something and he starts to break down. He's definitely groggy. He was definitely drugged. Who would have access to one of these? Green Metal Stables. The house was sold. This is the part I was going to say before. October 24th, 2014. But if you go through the public records, Holly still owns the home. How does that happen? Now, this is where it gets a little more interesting for me. I've been investigating this. And since then, I've had some pretty crappy luck. I've been wrongfully arrested. I've been arrested for defending myself, defending my wife, defending my children. I was considered to have used excessive force. But Children's Aid then got involved. They took my children from me. I've been homeless since. It all has to do with the system failing everyone. But again, while I was homeless, it gave me more time to look into this. So there's a plus side to everything, I suppose. But notice this name here, De Rochers. Now we're going to go over here, and if they don't like it, they can suck a dick. R.D. Rochers at the Hamilton CAS. That's Hamilton Children's Aid. Now, her name's supposed to be Renee, but when you run a background check on her email address, it comes up as Roy D. De Rochers. Current address, 16 Ellerly Road, United States. So why are people from the U.S. coming to Canada and telling Canadians that they don't get to see their children, don't get to have their children are going into care? So why are people from the U.S. coming to Canada and taking our children and putting them in care? Kind of suspicious. But it's funny that that name would show up here. You can say, oh, it's just a coincidence, but I don't believe in coincidences. And throughout this investigation, I'm going to come up with more and more coincidences, as you would call them. Dan Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan, who happens to be a well-known saintess. Well, he'll deny it. He even says the one thing that wrestlers never ever say. In fact, a news reporter once said that wrestling was fake, and another wrestler slapped the shit out of him backstage. But yet, he's willing to say wrestling is fake, And that, oh, I'm Catholic, I'm Catholic. Yeah, that means nothing. Religion's been destroyed by man. Catholics are by far some of the worst ones for it. They look an awfully lot similar. There's definitely a relation there, I would think. Now, we'll keep going. This it's from when I was arrested. February in 2022, the city of Hamilton. But it's interesting who signed it. Maria Sullivan. Again, a coincidence? Maybe. But I like to think outside the box. So we're going to keep going here. And then I'm going to show you something else. So here it is here. Monday, October 26th. There was a disturbing. It's supposed to say disturbance. But the police were called. Funny thing. October 26th. That's Kevin Sullivan's birthday. Had a psychic reading done, where even the psychic told us, be out by October. I don't know why, but you need to leave. We didn't get out in time, obviously. But we're going to do one more thing here. WCW. Where the big boys play, as Chris would say. Still think it's a coincidence? Maybe, but there's too many to ignore it. So, I'm going to end this episode here. Please feel free to leave comments. Let me know what you think. And hopefully the next one will be out in a few weeks. I appreciate anyone who took the time to watch it and look forward to hearing your responses.